It's Sunday, July 30, 2023. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to the Weekend Show, where we take a deep dive into the news of the week. You can support my work and independent journalism at patreon.com/5minutenews. Our guest today is a former associate of Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump in their desire to dig up dirt on the so-called Biden crime family. He was arrested in October 2019 at Dulles International Airport whilst en route to Austria and charged with planning to direct funds from a foreign government to US politicians while trying to influence US-Ukraine relations. He's now serving the remainder of his sentence under home confinement, and he joins us now. Lev Parnas, welcome to the Weekend Show.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you for having me.
It's quite the introduction. How do you feel when you hear that as your kind of abridged biography? How does it make you feel now?
It's kind of surreal, to even think about everything I went through in the past. Going back now, it's about 7 years. It's quite a turn from where I grew up and what I came up with in my life, and it's kind of something that I'm now embracing to do, better with, and instead of trying to hide from what happened, but accept it and move on and deal with it. And one of the things I've been doing is using that to get the truth out about what actually happened in all those years in Trump world while I was working for Trump, Giuliani, and some of the cohorts in the GOP.
A few people who have kind of come through the cult of Trump have come out the other side, especially after they've been handed down sentences. And as you know, last week I had Pam Hemphill on the show, and she, is a January 6th defendant. She served 2 months in prison. She's now trying to kind of spread the word, and she's facing some stiff opposition from what she calls the January 6 big names, tragically. I want to talk about, this idea of being Republican. Were you a lifelong Republican? Was that kind of who you were politically?
No, actually, I was never involved in politics. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I'm kind of like a street kid that grew up without a father, trying to make it in the United States, in business. Business was basically what I was always interested in, and making money was my priority, and taking care of my family. Never really cared too much about politics, never understood politics, didn't understand how it could affect me or anybody around me. But then in 2015, when Trump decided to run for office, running in the same circles with him, as you could say it, and, also when I was younger, I used to have a little stint. I worked for his father, Fred, back in the days, and I've met his daughter, Ivanka, several times, and Don Jr. and Eric, and several different events, and Trump himself. It kind of felt like somebody that was, just one of us, like a regular guy like myself, a businessman that now is going to be president, running for president of the United States. So it was kind of a surreal moment, and I felt, let me go see what's going on, and I started going to his rally.
What did you do for his father? What was just tell us very quickly about what that was and how that kind of played out.
My first experience with real estate, I used to work for a real estate company in Brooklyn that was selling co-ops at the time, and in Brooklyn, where the Trump family owned a lot of real estate in Brooklyn, Queens, New York, and we happened to sell co-ops for the Trumps in one of their buildings, and I happened to be one of the salespeople there, and I got a chance to meet him and interact with him.
Obviously, a lot's been written about Fred Trump, racism and connections to the KKK and not wanting to rent to people of color. Is that something you came across?
I was 16 at the time, so I didn't have too excessive a relationship with him to get deep down there, but just from the small time that the relationship that I did have, you could tell the authoritarian nature and the human being, and the way he would act, hold himself, and talk. And one of the buildings we were dealing with, it was primarily to Russian, Ukrainian speaking people that immigrated from the Soviet Union at the time. So that was the clientele we were basically dealing with.
You came to the US when you were 3. You were born in the Ukraine.
Correct.
And you came under the refugee resettlement program.
Yes.
So obviously, 3 is a very young age. Did you kind of keep up your Ukrainian, or did you try and assimilate, become a kind of New Yorker? Did you maintain both? I mean, how did you feel about that kind of concept of migration?
I think of an interesting combination of a lot of things because we immigrated at a period of time in 1976. Back then, it wasn't Ukraine; it was the Soviet Union. There was no Russia or Ukraine. We were all considered the same people. We spoke the same language, and we all were prosecuted by the same government. I immigrated to a place in Brooklyn, which was known like Little Odessa, Brighton Beach, and it just so happened that the community was, Russian-speaking. Same type of families like ourselves that immigrated from the Soviet Union. So we built a very strong community, very strong bond, and that allowed me to keep my Ukrainian Russian roots, basically speaking the language, not forgetting it, being able to understand. And but at the end of the day, I'm always a Brooklyn kid. America comes first. This is my country. This is what I love. This is where I grew up. I have 6 kids that are born here. I've been a citizen for over 47 years. So, that comes first. But I was able to maintain all those roots and use them to my advantage growing up by doing, since 1989, 1990s as a young kid, being able to do business with the former Soviet Union, and when the wall came down, and then eventually Russia, Ukraine, and that's how I was able to establish all those contacts and keep them.
A lot of people from New York, the New York kind of metropolitan area, they now are saying, well, we always knew that Trump was a criminal, right? It was very kind of obvious the way he ran his businesses, the way he kind of puffed out his chest and pretended to have the tallest buildings, and he was a salesman and a showman, and he wasn't really taken that seriously. Prior to going on The Apprentice, tell me about kind of who you thought Donald Trump was in those early years when he was just a developer and wasn't a TV personality. I
mean, you hit it on the dot. I mean, he was primarily, what I thought of him and what I knew of him at the time was he was a entertainer, and he was a developer, and he was a personality, somebody that would be constantly in the news and the media, and somebody that was very wealthy that we looked up to, because growing up in the streets of Brooklyn, we grew up poor, and we kind of idolized the wealthy, rich individuals, and somebody you want to look up to and be like, have the nice cars, have, the nice clothes, nice apartments, and so on. But I write in my book, which I'm coming out in the next couple of months, called Shadow Diplomacy, that will get into a lot of the things that, Trump and what happened in Trump world, is that, he was always involved with the mob influence. Anybody that knows anything about New York knows that back in the 80s and early 90s, all the unions and anything that had to do with construction was controlled by some of the most infamous mobsters that, you might have heard of, like, Sammy the Bull Gravato, John Gotti. And Trump had to deal with people like that. And growing up in an authoritarian family with Fred Trump, I mean, Donald kind of drifted towards that and enjoyed that. And that's why you could see nowadays the way he ran the White House, the way he acts, the way he talks is more like trying to be like a godfather than a leader. And so he always had that criminal mentality. The only difference between him and them was he had a lot of money, and he had, the background, the pedigree, as they say it, where he could be able to get away with it and use his high-powered lawyers and money to be able to incubate him and protect him from, the law.
There's as a parent, and I'm sure you must feel the same as a parent of 6 kids, this idea that the American dream, especially for a 3-year-old kid coming from the former Soviet Union, to kind of look up to Donald Trump and think that is like where it's at. Just the idea of being, and I understand that wealth is very much baked into the American dream, to be rich and to be famous, this phrase. And I think that we've learned in the modern life that actually neither of those are particularly healthy.
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
So how much of what he stood for and that kind of dream that you had growing up, how much of those were connected? You know, did Donald Trump represent the American dream to you?
I mean, you have to understand, coming from a communist country and then settling in a place where we were all poor, trying to make it, everybody was starting up, building their lives there, so we were all equal. Looking up to a guy like Donald Trump, he symbolized the American dream at the time because of his wealth, his power, And now, obviously, having my own kids, and that's one of the reasons why I'm on a crusade to tell the truth, so that people know he's not somebody that needs to be looked up at, actually looked down at, especially, running our country and representing the country in the whole world, and having our kids look up to him as our president, because our president should be a role model and not somebody that, dictates and tries to divide instead of unite people.
It's interesting, isn't it, when we look back on those things that you thought were impressive. He never did anything good. There was no goodness. There was no kind of great charity work or philanthropy or anything really. It was just it was pretty vile if we look at it now.
Yeah, if you look back at it, but it's like they say, Monday morning quarterback. It's easy to look back at now, but living it, being in that situation, your priorities were screwed up. I mean, you didn't understand what charity was all about because you were the charity. You were the people that needed the help. Yeah. You kind of looked at, you didn't understand, as I could talk for myself and, the community I came from, as we were still learning. We didn't understand what it is to be in the United States, what the United States was all about, and having somebody that was on TV and you saw his name all over the buildings, and be such a powerful human being. You looked at that as that's what the American dream is, not understanding the person himself and understanding what really was behind him. And it took me many years, even like I said, 7 years ago, when I decided to join the cult of Trump, and got basically sucked into it because I didn't know I was joining a cult. I thought I was, I thought I was, following the President of the United States and listening to him. I didn't realize that I was being sucked into a cult at the time. Even then, I didn't realize that, what he stood for, because when he ran in 2016, if you remember, he ran for the people. Even then, it was a total lie. It was basically, looked at him and saying, I don't know politics, but I understand him. He's a businessman. I don't know the Republicans or the Democrats. And a lot of people were a little tired of both parties at the time. And I think that's why he got the opportunity to, succeed and win. In
addition to some help from the Kremlin as well,
through
social media.
Oh, absolutely. Not just the Kremlin, I think China, a lot of other.
Yeah. It was like a perfect storm of events, really, including, James Comey getting up.
I was just about to say that. The Hillary Clinton.
Hillary
that
Clinton
was
thing.
It was the perfect storm. It was a combination of a lot of things that transpired in the time, in our period of time in our country at the time, and obviously the Russians interfering, which they always do, and then you have Comey come out 2 weeks prior to it. So, I think it was the perfect storm that got him in there.
Yeah. Which kind of begs the question, is it therefore not possible that it could happen again? Do you see what I mean? Because, I seem to think that, in 2015, 2016, when he was campaigning, yes, he was doing all this rhetoric of I'm not the swamp, I'm going to drain the swamp, and, I'm the anti-politician, I don't know DC, I've never been there, but I've only been there 17 times, like all that rhetoric. And people bought into that, and I totally get that. And I don't blame anybody for voting for Donald Trump, because, people are sick of politicians in every country. And if you, from a marketing perspective, if you can present yourself as a non-politician, as plenty of people have done, including in Ukraine, right, with Vladimir Zelensky. The guy played an unwitting president on a TV show, that is a perfect storm, isn't it, as well, for him to get elected. That's
a great example what happened with Zelensky. That was a perfect storm in Ukraine also.
Right.
But the difference is, look at how Zelensky stood up and basically became a hero, whereas Donald Trump became, a villain.
Well, I guess breeding has a lot to do with that. You know, Zelensky started out as a comedian, as an entertainer, right? And the other guy started out as a criminal with a criminal past and a criminal family. It's two very different things. And I want to talk a lot about this idea of, you know, growing up, or certainly Trump's family growing up around criminality, and this idea of trying to pin crimes on the Bidens, who are a family that just had such a completely different life, you know, in
Absolutely.
Delaware. It's just so different. So tell us about how you first connected with Rudy Giuliani. You met him through Donald Trump?
Well, I was part of his inner circle since 2016. I mean, I was at front row at every, debate that he had with Hillary Clinton. I was at all his rallies front row. I was with him at the Hilton when he won. I had private dinners where we had fundraisers for him that I helped make happen with other people involved. I met Giuliani in passerby moments, but we were never close. I knew of him, but we were never really like friends or associates. So Giuliani came into the circle about 2018. I was introduced to him by a former ASU and a friend of his called John Sale. John Sale's an attorney here in South Florida. Used to be ASU in New York, served with Giuliani. And it had to do with the company that I was trying to set up at the time called Fraud Guarantee. A lot of people laugh at the name. They think, oh, you know, that fits them out. You're a fraudster. But it was...
But didn't you create that because of Google searches?
Absolutely not. No,
and the word fraud next to you? Is that a conspiracy theory?
That was absolutely the media running, because when I got arrested, the media was trying to portray me. Nobody knew who I was, and they were because of the way Bill Barr set everything up. I was being portrayed as like the worst of the worst, and they were trying to, degrade me and shut me up and, make me look like a bad guy. But anybody that knows what Fraud Guarantee was set up to do was supposed to be the anti-Bernie Madoff policy. My background was in Wall Street, and a lot of people would lose money, and then people would get convicted, but there would be no return of the money. Usually the money would always be lost. So we came up with an idea with a couple of friends of mine to basically set up an insurance policy where you could have against fraud. So if there would be any fraud in an investment, you could have an insurance policy, like you have an insurance policy on a car and a house, to be able to recoup your finances. So if the CEO went to prison, somebody got convicted of fraud, you would be able to recoup your investment and not lose the money and not have the government chase them for retribution and stuff like that. So that's what Fraud Guarantee was all about.
Giuliani was known as America's mayor, wasn't he? This phrase was associated with him because of 9/11 and the prominence that he had in New York during that period, and how he, said the right things at the right time, and, gave the impression that he was a good soul who really cared about the city. How much of that do you think was true? Do you think, he really was America's mayor, or was this just, all for show?
I didn't know Giuliani back then. I would, like you and like everybody else, I looked up to him like America's mayor. Growing up in New York, I had my love and hate for him. When he was the ASU at first, prosecuting people, a lot of people that I knew, and me and him used to discuss it and have laughs about it because of the interaction. And then when 9/11 happened, and, him being in the right place at the right time and being on the stage, obviously I gave him tremendous respect, and just like the whole country, the whole world, made him America's mayor. But then spending time with him and really getting to know him, Giuliani is kind of like a fake, just like Donald Trump is. He, in his own way, he's his own showman. One of the things that he thrives for is power. He thrives for the attention. He wants to be in the limelight. That's kind of why he sold his soul to Trump and basically gave up everything that he had going on, the contracts, the big money, to be able to represent Trump, because after losing in 2014, and not when he ran for president and when he lost, he kind of became nobody, even though, yes, he was able to get contracts and make money, but he lost that spotlight. And Donald Trump gave it back to him, and that's why he gave that all up to be able to be around Trump. So I think Giuliani, his true colors are coming out right now. now that he's not an attorney general, now that, he's not the mayor, where he's just, Trump sidekick, you could actually see to what degree and he's willing to go and goes to be able to get something done. And then you could think back of some of the cases that he had, what he probably did go and do back then, and you could probably see the resemblance.
To be a public servant in the role of a mayor, or even to be a prosecutor, it's like there's a lot of drive to do good, to be a good person, to put the bad guys away, or to rebuild a city, or be there when the city needs you, as was the case at 9/11. Do you feel like there was goodness in Giuliani and he just got corrupted and that desire for power was too great? Or do you think that he's always, like Trump, didn't get the love from his parents that he craved and obviously, needed to put himself on a pedestal to have any kind of, feeling of satisfaction?
I think it was a combination. I think he definitely had some, some good things in his heart that wanted to do good. I think when 9/11 happened, I think even the bad guys wanted to do good. I mean, it was kind of thing that united our country together. So I think he probably really did want, to do good for the city, for the state, for the country, for, as far as being, a prosecutor. I think he had his own agendas in certain things when going after the Italian mob because of his own personal family history, his father being attacked by some mobsters, some of his family actually being in the mob. But he had a love towards the mob. He respects these individuals more than he respects a majority of politicians. He used to tell me, because they at least were stand-up guys, and they have words, not like your politicians. They'll stab you in the back the first second they get a chance. So I think it was a combination. I think he had some good in him, definitely. I think he wanted to get rid of certain bad guys, but I also think that the publicity, the being on the front page, being on television, being that guy, would drive him to do certain things that maybe, he could have not done, not pushed so hard, not prosecuted that case, not given that person so many years, not done the things to the squeegee guys, like when he got rid of all the squeegee cleaners, the car that would clean the windows on the cars, and destroy them. Like, he had good, but I think he would go overboard an extent to be able to keep himself in the limelight and keep that power going.
Power is a word that kind of will come up, I'm sure, throughout this conversation. It really is something that these people, once they get a taste of it. And it's interesting how he says, it's either the mob or it's the politicians. He didn't realize that you could actually live in a space that doesn't involve either of those.
Right. No, he doesn't. I mean, his whole life is about either politics or gangsters. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, a day wouldn't go by, or maybe even a few hours wouldn't go by without him reciting something out of The Godfather. I mean, that was just like part of his life. Discussing, something happened, and he said he would, go into character like one of the characters in The Godfather, and say and make a statement about it and laugh. I mean, so we would constantly he would tell me stories about the mobsters that he would put away, and then he'd meet them afterwards in prison or somewhere, and how they would have a relationship. Then they understood each other, that it was his job to do what he did, it was their job to do what they were doing, and kind of that was the game.
It's so interesting to me because Donald Trump Jr.'s made a couple of Godfather references, right? It's almost as if the people who kind of are the mob, they're obsessed with these movies. They can't help but kind of immortalize these characters and these phrases from the films, and it kind of is a dead giveaway that they are a little too interested in the mafia than the average person.
Well, right. I mean, you could see who they look up to and who they stream to be like, by
Al Capone, as Trump keeps talking about.
Exactly,
right?
Al Capone. I mean, he constantly. It's because that's the world he grew up in. That's who even though he had power and money, but there was somebody that had more power than him at that time, and that was the mob. I don't care how much money he had, but he couldn't build his big building without coming to a table and making a deal with them. And he saw that, and he realized that, and he kind of, that's why, one of who was his famous attorney, was it Roy Cohn?
Roy Cohn.
There's a reason Roy Cohn was his attorney, because he represented the mob. So he tried to immortalize that situation, and that's why when he got into the White House, he basically turned the White House into he became the Godfather and started treating it like the mob.
Yeah, the same way that he ran the Trump organization. And Roy Cohn was like a father figure to him in a way. He kind of filled in the gaps that Fred Trump wasn't able to do.
Yeah, and Roy Cohn was able to protect him, at the same time teach him, because Roy Cohn was very well attuned with how the mob worked and how to, to deal with them, because he represented a lot of very top mobsters through his career. And so he was like his link in between, as a mentor, as a teacher, and as a protector.
We're going to take a quick break for our sponsor, but I want to come back and talk about your relationship with Giuliani and how you kind of started to take on projects on behalf of the former mayor of New York here on The Weekend Show. Did you know that your temperature at night can have one of the greatest impacts on your sleep quality? If you wake up too hot or too cold, I highly recommend you check out Miracle Maid's bed sheets. Inspired by NASA, Miracle Maid uses silver-infused fabrics and makes temperature-regulating bedding, so you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night long. Using silver-infused fabrics originally inspired by NASA, Miracle Maid sheets are thermoregulating and designed to keep you at the perfect temperature all night long, so you get a better sleep every night. These sheets are infused with silver that prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, leaving them to stay cleaner and fresh 3 times longer than other sheets. No more gross odors. Miracle sheets are luxuriously comfortable, without the high price tag of other luxury brands, and feel as nice, if not nicer, than bed sheets used by some 5-star hotels. Stop sleeping on bacteria. Bacteria can clog your pores, causing breakouts and acne. Sleep clean with Miracle. Go to trymiracle.com/weekend to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo code WEEKEND at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/weekend and use the code WEEKEND to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. That's trymiracle.com/weekend to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode. Have you heard of senescent cells, also known as zombie cells? These old, worn-out cells no longer serve a useful function for our health, wasting our energy and nutritional resources. These zombie cells tend to accumulate in our bodies as we age, leading to the aches, slow workout recoveries, and sluggish mental and physical energy associated with that middle-age feeling. Our sponsor, Neurohacker, packs 7 of the most science-backed senolytic ingredients into one formula called Qualia Senolytic, and you can take it just 2 days a month for fast, noticeable benefits for a much better aging process. Senolytic ingredients are science-backed to support our body's natural elimination of zombie cells. My body and energy levels feel about 15 years younger after just a couple of months of adding Qualia Senolytic to my diet. I love how easy it is to take. Having more physical and mental energy for my family and friends is such a win in how I show up for those I love. My productivity has doubled. I feel invigorated and enthusiastic again with the daily drive and enthusiasm to get things done. The formula is non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, and the ingredients are meant to complement one another, factoring in the combined effect of all ingredients together. It's also backed by a 100-day money-back guarantee, so you have almost 3 months to try Qualia Senolytic at no financial risk and decide for yourself. If you're in your late 20s or older, adding Qualia Senolytic to your diet can play a crucial role in combating negative aging symptoms. Go to neurohacker.com/weekend for up to 50% off Qualia Senolytic. And as a listener to The Weekend Show, use code WEEKEND at checkout for an extra 15% off your first purchase. That's neurohacker.com/weekend to try Qualia Senolytic with code WEEKEND and start aging on your terms. It's The Weekend Show, and we're back with Lev Parnas. So, how do you get from being a kind of, you kind of refer to yourself as a businessman, you're kind of running around New York, you're doing deals, you have this connections with your former home, the former Soviet Union, which is now Ukraine, and I guess because you're multilingual, that's very useful, isn't it, to people
absolutely.
like Trump and to Giuliani, because let's be honest, they can't really speak any language.
No, they can barely speak English.
Right. So if you're bilingual or multilingual, to people like that, you're very useful. Was that kind of how this kind of started, the fact that you had connections and that you could speak the language? Just tell us about how you first kind of interacted with Giuliani with this mission to kind of find dirt on Hunter Biden.
I mean, it just came out of the blue, actually. There was, by being in Trump world and by being in the mega cult, you would hear all these different conspiracy theories that were going on, but I was still on the outside of that because I was not involved in any of it. It started, hearing about the servers, the DNC servers are in Ukraine, that they were taken. All of a sudden, Manafort, there's the Black Ledger's fixed. It's not the same Black Ledger. So there was constant conversation, and that you would hear that things were going on, but I was kind of on the outside of that until one day we were in the Grand Havana room, where we would typically be like Rudy's office. We would be there at least once a day when we were in New York, smoking cigars, him having his drinks like usual. I don't drink, so I'll be drinking tea while he's drinking his scotch. And he got a phone call from one of his investigators, had to do with Ukraine. I think that's when something to do with Joe Biden, the video that was he seen about him coming out and saying to get rid of the Ukrainian ambassador, Viktor Shokin, or we were not going to give you $1 billion. And Giuliani, when he saw it, he kind of like his eyes lit up and he was like, we got him, like I got you moment. And I was kind of giddy, excited because I was by his side. I was already very close to him at the time also, and I was close to Trump from separately. Us three didn't kind of intertwine yet. And this was where this is when we started intertwining. And he basically asked me, with my contacts in Ukraine, if I could verify some of this information or get him some information about this stuff. And as a businessman, I also was kind of like a fixer, even though I didn't look at myself as a fixer. But depending what you think a fixer is, I had a lot of contacts and I could always get somebody together. I could always, didn't matter on what level, either on the governmental level, the street level. I had contacts all over Ukraine, Russia, Europe, and in the
You weren't shy to kind of get yourself in the middle.
I mean, that's how I grew up. I grew up in the world of that, just that's where, some people get a chance to grow up and follow in their father's footsteps and go to Harvard or Yale or different colleges and then become lawyers. I didn't have that opportunity. I grew up around all street people, So, I learned the hard way and made a lot of contacts, which were extremely powerful contacts, through my own ways. And so Giuliani asked me if, we could verify some of that stuff. And I said, absolutely. I took it as a badge of honor, that he's asking me to get involved in that, Then a few weeks later, we were invited to the Hanukkah party at the White House. And I was going there. And Giuliani, we met in Washington, D.C., and he said to me, that he was going to the Christmas party, but it might be a good idea for him to go also to the Hanukkah party where we could have a one-on-one with Trump under the radar, because all of these things, if you go to the Oval and you see Trump, there's a recording of it, there's a record of it. It gets leaked to the press, and that's one of the things they try to hide all the time. So the press would know, they would be under the radar. So we used the Hanukkah party to go there, and Giuliani was going to update Trump on, my relationships in Ukraine and what he saw about the video and what was going on, and see what the next steps would be. And excuse me. So I think it was December 6th or somewhere like that. I don't remember the exact day. We went to the Hanukkah party. We went through the back entrance, not the regular entrance. We were greeted by the Secret Service. We were taken. We were going to the White House, and Giuliani said to me, "You go to the party. Meet me at the party. I'm going to go to the residence, and I'm going to have a one-on-one with Trump and bring him up to speed on everything before he comes in."
So Giuliani has just access in and out whenever he likes.
Oh, absolutely.
It was just it was no big deal.
Oh,
he didn't have to show ID or anything. They're like, "There's America's mayor, let him in."
I mean, we still showed ID, to go. We went through the metal detector, but, we went through the process. But, I mean, it was pretty simple compared to when I went to the White House through a regular, fundraiser or something like that.
Right.
You wait in line and you had to go through all this, craziness, going in with Giuliani through the back entrance was a totally different experience, So then he went to the residence. I went to the party with Igor and some other people, and we were hanging out there, just taking it all in. And then all of a sudden, Giuliani came down, and Trump came down, and Trump was going to make a speech in front of everybody. Giuliani stepped away from Trump, came up to me, and he said that I spoke to him, and he's going to come see us in a little bit, and everything is great. About 5-10 minutes later, a Secret Service agent came up to us, excuse me, and asked us to go he said Trump wanted to see us in the Red Room. So we went to the Red Room, and I'm not going to go into too many details because it's part of my book, stuff that's going to be published in my book, and also stuff that I'm doing for the Meidas group. I'm putting out these videos with never before seen videos.
We don't want to spill too many beans.
Yeah, we're not going to spill too many beans.
I understand that. Even though we're on the same team, I understand.
So, but we have some interesting videos. And that's
the Red Room. Tell us about the Red Room. I mean, what is that in terms of that was a room that was not being used for the party? That was somewhere that you could go and talk privately?
It was like a living room type of area in the White House. It had a Christmas tree up there. It had lots of paintings, historical artifacts, dating back to other presidents and other, things that happened in our country. And we ended up going there and waiting for Trump, and then we had our meeting. And then I was tasked to go to Ukraine, which I ended up going in end of December to find Viktor Shokin, and that's how it all started.
And you were being used as a back channel to get to President Petro Poroshenko.
Yeah, it started with Petro Poroshenko.
And so do you feel that, because obviously now with hindsight, we're kind of looking back and looking at how much Trump knew, because Trump does this thing where it's all deny, right? Blaming other people, saying it was them, it wasn't me, I was never there. I mean, even with you, he's like, I've never heard of this guy, never met this guy. I mean, it's so funny. And I've looked at so many photos of Trump events where you're next to him giving it the thumbs. And I almost, and there's dozens of them. I mean, this is amazing.
I'm going to start releasing videos of,
right.
I have video of the Red Room actually that I'm going to release on the MeidasTouch network coming up. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you could certainly do a coffee table book of photographs with you doing the thumbs next to the disgraced former president, because I always thought, you always fascinated me in this, because you really did look to me, you look like a spy. Why is this guy here? What does he do? How come he's giving it the big smile? And I always thought, I wonder if that guy is going to one day spill the beans, because he's in the room where it happens. You're always there.
Yeah.
And obviously a lot of people now are, including people like Cassidy Hutchinson, that are
coming out,
feel it's their duty to the country to tell the truth. Absolutely. In some cases, for the first time ever, telling the truth. Truth was not something that was particularly favorable in this administration. So when you were there, did you ever think that at some point in the future, there's a lot of intel that you are gathering? I mean, this is compromat to coin a phrase, right?
Not really.
Did that ever cross your mind, or were you so in the cult that it wasn't an issue?
Not only was I so in the cult, I was so determined that I'm saving our country, that I'm working for the President of the United States to, take out the deep state, take out these, corrupt politicians that were trying to destroy our country, that, there was even word float around that I might get the Medal of Honor for the stuff I was doing. So, and the reason why you see me so giddy in all these pictures is because, all these, to me, it was all surreal. I had to pinch myself every day and realize, here I am, I'm a Brooklyn kid from the streets, and now I'm at the White House. I'm around the most powerful people in the world. I have all these congressmen coming to me, and looking up to me, and I knew I kind of didn't belong, but it was because Trump anointed me, and that's all that mattered. And everybody then, had to bow down to the king type of scenario. So I was taking it all in, and that's why, I have all these pictures and videos, because for me it was historical. It was something I wanted to share with my kids, my grandkids, something that, because a lot of times my family didn't even know where I was or where I was a part of, because I had to keep it so secret. My wife wouldn't even know where I'm traveling, what I'm doing. So it was a way that one day to be able to sit down around a family dinner table and say, look at where I was and look at how it was. So that's why I was so giddy and excited. And, to me, it was a historical moment. That's something that I couldn't imagine I would be ever a part of.
Ironically, we've heard from Donald Trump several times where he goes, "Can you believe I'm the president?"
Exactly.
Do you think it's the same thing, that he also feels like, he deep inside, he knows that he's not smart enough, that he doesn't have the skills to be able to operate on the world stage, let alone the national stage, and somehow he's managed to pull it off, and it's as much of a shock to him as it is to the rest of us?
Oh yeah, I think it was a bigger shock to him. And that day in the Hilton, when he realized he won, everybody, we were all in shock. It was like, because we were at the party and we were convinced that he's going to lose, even though we, hoped, but everybody kind of in reality, said there's no way he's going to win this thing. There's, just not going to happen. And then when you started seeing the results start coming in, and it came closer and closer and closer, and then eventually when he won, everybody was so dumbfounded that, it was like, one of those crazy moments. It's like he got the keys to the house, but he didn't even know what to do with it. He didn't know, the transition team wasn't set up. He wasn't prepared whatsoever, because he never imagined that he was going to win. So yeah.
There's rumors that Melania cried and didn't want him to do it, and that actually it was, the whole thing was really a marketing exercise, because he wanted to set up like a television station, a Trump TV,
Absolutely.
And just continue his TV career on his own terms.
He was trying to save his brand, because he was he was having difficulty with the brand at that time. His show got canceled, The Apprentice, and this was a new, the new marketing gig, and it kind of went a little too far, and he actually won, which he never expected to.
Let's talk a little bit about you being in the cult of Trump. We've used that phrase a few times. The phrase has been immortalized in Dr. Steve Hassan's book, The Cult of Trump, where he talks about undue influence and this kind of mind control that kind of gets you in there and keeps you in there. And no matter how smart or, traveled you are, you will always have a vulnerability. What was your vulnerability, do you think, that kind of kept you or enticed you into the cult and then kept you there?
Everything you said is 100%, because we all have a weakness, and these cult leaders, they find that weakness in every single person, and they thrive on it, push on it. And then, once you're in, they use basically mental manipulation and block you from having any other type of source, friends, and block you into a small circle of individuals that you're only allowed to be associated with, only the media that you're only going to listen to. And then eventually, as time goes by, you have no opinion of what's, you can't rationalize, because you have nothing to base it off of. So the truth is the only thing that you see in front of you, and you can't even compromise, no matter how smart you are, because you have nothing to, base it off of. To me, I think it was growing up in the way I did, and being in the White House, being around the President of the United States. It was something that was so surreal that the power of that took over, and kind of, basically, I lost my head. I thought that this is like, hitting the jackpot, as you could say it, because obviously for me, it was not about politics. It was about business. And the dreams that I started having about what could be after his, when he leaves office, the power, the business, I've made it, I have it.
Yeah. And
that was kind of what drew me into that. And then it transformed from that into, I'm a very loyal person. That's how I grew up, and loyalty was the one thing we had in New York, in the area where I grew up.
Which is the one thing that Trump refers to all the time.
And the one thing he doesn't
James
have.
Comey for loyalty, right. And everybody else.
And it's the one thing he doesn't have. That's the problem. That's why a lot of people don't understand. He's the most unloyal person out there. He accepts loyalty, but he doesn't give the loyalty back. But I didn't know that at the time. I also was, obviously under the cult mentality, believing that he was loyal to us and everybody's loyal to each other, not realizing that majority of the leaders in that cult are not not only loyal to each other, but they're not loyal to themselves. I mean, they'll sell their soul, they could flip-flop to whatever they want. They don't care about the people. They don't care about the followers. They just care about their own, personal agenda, their political agenda.
Did it ever occur to you that just in conversations with Trump, that he doesn't really know very much about anything? That he's a bullshitter, right? So he doesn't understand where countries are. He doesn't understand this idea of international trade or of diplomacy. He doesn't really know anything about anything. The only thing he maybe knows about is real estate in the New York area.
Yeah, no. My first interaction with that, where I kind of had a WTF moment, is when we were having dinner. And it was a small group of us, I think 6 of us. And Don Jr. was there, Trump was there, some people from the Super PAC. And I was sitting right across from him. And that was a time when he just sent over Javelin missiles, I think, to Ukraine or something like that. And he brings up the subject.
He didn't know what those were either.
No, he had no idea.
No idea, yeah.
So what really got me was when he brought that up, he really didn't even know where Ukraine was on the map. He didn't know where Ukraine was. He thought Ukraine was part of Russia somehow, kind of still, he was confused. I mean, so there's even a tape, I think, that somebody leaked out there where, he's asking me, how long would Ukraine even last without, in a war against Russia, and I answer him, not very long without our support. I mean, and even at that time, I mean, he never liked Ukraine. He thought of them because they were not powerful. He looked up to authoritarian type of individuals like Putin. So he, looked up, he's like, oh yeah, Russia would destroy him in a heartbeat. Putin is strong. He never gave them a chance. And he also was very pissed at them because of, thinking that they didn't help him out, that they were involved. He was convinced that they were involved in his sabotage of his, during the 2016 election with the servers and stuff like that. So his hatred towards Ukraine, not even knowing where it was growing, from that point.
But did that not set off alarm bells in you that, this guy is the president? I mean, it's not like he's just a real estate developer who doesn't really know anything about Ukraine. That's fine. But to be the commander-in-chief, the most powerful man in the universe, with his finger on the nuclear button, I mean, did you not at any point go, this smells a little dodgy?
I mean, it's easy to say now when you're out of the cult, but when you're in the cult, I mean, I could tell you, out of the 6 people that were sitting there, they were leaders of industries in our country. I mean, CEOs of some, there were some CEOs there of multi-billion-dollar. I mean, I'm not going to mention their names, but some of the most powerful men in our country. And when he said that, everybody just laughed, like it was
I think a lot of that probably went on, people like Rex Tillerson, for example.
Well, I could compare.
They had no respect for him.
And again, I'll compare it to my experiences with the mob. I mean, when you're sitting with a powerful godfather or a powerful captain, and they're not all of them are smart. Not all of them are, there are people in there that are educated and people that are smart, and they're just there, because they chose that life. But a lot of them are there because of the bloodlines, and, they're animals, hardcore criminals. They have no idea. They could barely speak. And if one of them says something, and it's as stupid as it might sound, everybody will be like, like
Right.
it's like you're not gonna, look the other way. And it's the same thing with Trump. Like he would say some of the stupid things, he'd do stupid things, make jokes that weren't funny, but everybody laughed and then after a period of time, it kind of becomes normal. It's that mob mentality, that cult mentality. And that's why I said, people say, why do you keep saying a cult? Because that's what it is, when you don't have the freedom or right to think for yourself and you can't think straight and you're being told what to do, how to do, and you're following along, you can't think for yourself. That's a cult.
Let's talk for a second about this desire that Giuliani had to find dirt on Hunter Biden and therefore Joe Biden, this connection with Burisma, which was this energy company that he was on the board of and had been on the board of for a while, that was paying him somewhere between, 83,
I think 83,000 a month, 83,000
a month. Yeah. So it was a lot of money. And, we can all recognize that Hunter Biden probably didn't have much experience in the energy industry. I don't know, but I mean, it's like
it wasn't about that. It happens here in the United States, all over the world. People, powerful companies like to hire namesakes, as they say. It's somebody with a powerful name, with a reputation, and they put you on the board to make themselves look more powerful and big. And it happens all the time.
And famously, Joe Biden said to his son, "I hope you know what you're doing."
Yeah, I mean, in not only Joe Biden, but also Christopher Hines, because Christopher Hines was also given the opportunity to join the board of Burisma at the time. It was him, Devin Archer, and Christopher Hines, and he stepped back and said, this is crazy. I hope you guys know what you're doing. But again, to be fair to Hunter, I mean, he was, not in a good state of mind at that time. Yeah. I mean, people don't realize when you're doing drugs or you're living that type of a lifestyle, it's very difficult to make sane and rational decisions. So, again, I'm not justifying, but again, he did nothing wrong. I mean, illegally wise, there was nothing wrong with what he did, and that's why there was never any proof about it. But,
So what was it that Giuliani was just so convinced that there must be criminality because Hunter Biden had this job and was being paid so much? Is that what it was? He just was on a mission to find. It was like an investigation in search of a crime.
Well, yes and no. I mean, it was more had to do with Joe Biden than Hunter Biden. Giuliani hates Joe Biden. He talks about him plagiarizing something back in the day when he was young senator. I think a speech or something that he plagiarized. He talks about him constantly being a crook. So he has a hatred towards Joe Biden, and every time he comes out of his mouth, he says Joe is a crook, Joe Biden is a crook. And Hunter was just a scapegoat to try to prove that Joe Biden is the crook. It's kind of, you reflect on what you are. So they were trying to say that he's the godfather of the Biden family. Like what Trump was doing with his own group of people. They were trying to say that's what Joe Biden was doing, that he put him in Burisma because he wanted to control control Ukraine. He wanted to take over Ukraine. It stemmed back from the Clinton era. The Clintons wanted to, then the Bidens wanted to, that the Democrats wanted to control Ukraine for their own purposes and stuff like that.
It's a convenient conspiracy theory, and to the untrained ear, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, and that's the crazy part. I mean, that's what makes you believe so hard, because when you see little bits and pieces, and and I can understand the people, and that's why I wrote my letter to James Comer, because what he's doing is a travesty and injustice, to the American public. Because if it's somebody that's been in that world and lived it and seen it every day, watching the way he comes out with bits and pieces of information and says this and that, I mean, it's almost impossible for the regular person not to believe it's really happening. There has to be fact. I mean, why that Joe Biden or Hunter Biden did something criminal or illegal. But they know the truth, because when you do the full investigation, there was no there. There was a lot of accusations, and a lot of the accusations came from a lot of corrupt Ukrainian officials that were trying to use that for their own political purposes. Had nothing to do with the United States. We got into, basically Giuliani and Trump got into their kind of game that they were playing between themselves, and brought it upon ourselves and dragged the United States into it.
We need to take another quick break, but
Sure.
I want to come back and look at where we're at now with Hunter Biden, but also with these new charges for Donald Trump on
Absolutely.
The Weekend Show. This episode of The Weekend Show is brought to you by Manuka honey. Now, when I say the word honey, you might be thinking about the stuff that comes in those plastic bear-shaped bottles at the supermarket. Well, this is nothing like that. Manuka makes Manuka honey, a super honey that comes from New Zealand, where the bees only feed on the nectar of the Manuka tea tree, making something that is rich, herbaceous and complex with a creamier texture that's unlike anything you've ever tried before. You can use it just like the honey that you're used to, but Manuka honey is super because it also contains unique antioxidants and prebiotics, as well as a natural antibacterial compound called MGO that only comes from the nectar of this tea tree. These nutrients support optimal immune and digestive health, so it's win-win. You can continue to use honey in all of the ways you love, and you can enjoy all of the health benefits of MGO as well. Manuka sent me a jar and squeeze bottle of their 850 Plus MGO Manuka honey, their best-selling product. The 850 Plus honey has this creamy caramel texture that melts in your mouth, and it's unlike anything I've ever tried. I can grab a spoonful out of a jar and put it in my favorite beverage, or squeeze some honey out on some toast or oatmeal. It's delicious. Each morning I start my day with a spoonful of the Manuka honey, and it's the perfect amount of sweetness with the perfect consistency. If you head to manuka.com/weekend or use code WEEKEND, you'll automatically get an extra free pack of the 850 Plus honey sticks with your order, a $15 value. Now, I love the jar and squeeze bottle, but the extra pack of compostable honey sticks is also perfect for whenever you're on the go. You can bring them with you when you're traveling, if you need a quick snack or running errands, and they're the perfect energy boost if you're out for a run or at the gym. So go to Manukora, manukora.com/weekend or use code WEEKEND to get a free pack of compostable honey sticks with your order. You haven't tasted or seen honey like this before, so indulge and try some honey with superpowers from Manuka. We're back with Lev Parnas. So, this is you're now in the middle of a kind of a political vortex. You are doing what you think is the best for the country. You're trying to find out if Joe Biden and Hunter Biden are corrupt, when Joe Biden, let's be honest, has lived his entire life in the public eye as a public servant, as a public defender, and then obviously on Capitol Hill and as a senator. And then as vice president, and then 4 years off, and then felt that he was compelled to run for president because he couldn't believe how the rise of fascism was presenting itself in the U.S. and did us all a favor, really. And now people just complain that he's too old, which is ironic, really. Seeing as that
it's crazy. And when you take a look, Trump's only a couple of years younger than him.
Yeah.
And then you take a look at like Chuck Grassley and some of Mitch McConnell and some of the other people that are running our country. But Joe is too old. So I think that's
it's an excuse because they don't have any dirt on him. This is the problem, isn't it? So they went looking. They use you to go looking for dirt. And I don't want to cover stuff that you've talked about in other conversations or other interviews because, this is all in the public domain.
Yeah. But
just to kind of sum up, how did it feel for people like Giuliani and Trump when you come back and you're like, there's nothing? This guy is, to all intents and purposes, just, playing out a role and being well paid, but there is no connection to Joe Biden or anything else.
Oh, there was none of that. It was like if you ever seen that movie where you come up to the mobster, the Godfather, the big boss, and you give him some bad news and he says, get out of here, go find it. That's what it was basically like.
Right. Serious.
If he would get information that he didn't like, he would disregard it. If there was any information that came out that would be, helpful towards proving Joe innocent and Hunter innocent, it would get buried. Yeah. And we would go on
flush
to the
it
next
down the toilet or eat it.
Exactly.
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump would do exactly. And then there would be a new conspiracy theory, and that, that's the same old playbook as they're using right now. If you take a look at, Comer and, Marjorie Greene and what they're doing in Congress, it's like one day it's this whistleblower, then this whistleblower gets arrested because he's an arms dealer. Then we go to the next whistleblower, and then there's a next
Chinese
whistleblower.
spy.
Right, and then we go. So it's constantly a new story. As soon as a story gets debunked or it hits a dead wall, they go to the next one because they don't want to get to the bottom of the truth. They're just trying to prolong it long enough and keep the American people in suspense, kind of like, that suspenseful movie where you're on the edge of your seat, where you're about to get the big news, where you're about to see the ending, the climax, but the climax never comes because the climax is meant for the 2024 election just to get Trump in office, and then you'll never hear about this ever again.
Part of the propaganda machine is to confuse people, isn't it? To kind of throw so much intel and data and propaganda out there that people, they kind of hear little bits of things, but they don't really care for the detail because there's too much to process. Yeah. Did you see that in action? I mean, did you actually witness Trump or Giuliani generating this propaganda at source to get out there?
Oh, absolutely. And it was done with the help of John Solomon and people like Sean Hannity, Fox News, people like Devin Nunes, Senator John Solomon, and Ron Johnson, who's still senator, Wisconsin. I mean, it was done. It wasn't, they would generate it and then it would get pushed through either the halls of Congress and then through the media, and you would get bits and pieces. You'd, see Hannity, breaking news today, we're going to tell you something crazy. And it's ironic because growing up in the United States, if I could tell from my own experiences, I was taught to believe in our congressmen, our senators. They're supposed to be pure. They're supposed to be there to protect the people. They're supposed to be there to have our interests. So they can't lie. They're not going to come out and lie. They might not be perfect, but, if they're going to come out on national television, and say something, it's going to, you're taught to believe it. And then if the media reports it, it has to be true because, they can't, there's certain rules and regulations that would prohibit them from doing it. That's what most people in our country believe and feel. So when you see them come out there and on TV and you have, the propaganda being spread with bits and pieces like, we have breaking news coming up and, and then you see 2-3 senators or congressmen coming up and Kevin McCarthy saying we're going to start impeachment. I mean, the average person is not sitting there on the internet 12 hours a day or trying to find out the real information and get to the bottom of it. He comes home and he has a couple of minutes to watch the daily news before he does stuff with his family or she does stuff with her family, and she gets a glimpse of it. And, if she sees her local congressman or 2 or 3 of them come out and say the same thing, I mean, it's fact. I mean, what is she going to do? She has nothing to refer to or balance it off because most people don't watch every television station. You're either, you have your favorite channel, either you watch Fox or CNN or MSNBC, and that's what you watch, and that's what you kind of tend to believe.
And Fox was the linchpin for a lot of this because Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson at the time, and Laura Ingraham, these people all had a direct line to Donald Trump.
Oh, absolutely.
It meant that if he wanted to get something out, he put it to them. They said it. You could guarantee that every Republican who was watching the news was watching Fox News, and therefore it suddenly kind of started to echo, which is why when senators or congresspeople were interviewed, you would hear them saying exactly the same thing that you'd heard on Fox the night before.
Yeah, that's exactly, you hit it on that. That's exactly right. I mean, it's the same talking points. They would get all the same talking points and they would just repeat. It's like the Stalin method. Trump, kind of lives by that. If you say something, if you look at something that's white and you say it's black long enough, you keep saying black, people start eventually saying, okay, that's black. Like, let's move on. Yeah. It's black. And that's kind of what they're doing. They keep just repeating the same thing, not caring that they don't have no evidence or backup behind it, because, and then eventually people are like, all right, enough. I got you. Yeah, he's guilty. He's done, Yeah. And that's kind of the method.
So Hunter Biden currently, as we're talking now, is still negotiating his plea deal because, there was some details that were there was disagreement between the parties. But ultimately, he is being charged for tax fraud, or for unpaid taxes, I should say, not tax fraud, unpaid taxes.
That he paid back.
Which he paid back, and being possession of a firearm whilst being a drug addict. And it's very interesting and important that we do acknowledge what you said earlier about people who don't understand addiction and about the illness, because it's a disease.
It's a disease.
He's been very ill. And this is why his dad, as all dads would do for their kids, want to support them and do right by them, and he wouldn't disown him. I mean, he already lost his other son, so he's absolutely going to do what he can for his boy. But his boy has never had a place in the administration. Mm-hmm. He's rarely in the White House. And if you contrast that with Trump and the Trump crime family, of course, with Jared Kushner and Ivanka and Don Jr., just having these roles, these official and unofficial roles as advisors and spokespeople. And I mean, I remember seeing Ivanka when they relocated the Israeli embassy.
I was there.
Do you remember?
I was there.
Were you there?
I was there. I was there at the relocation with Ambassador Friedman. Yeah,
that was like a mind-blowing press conference to me, to see Ivanka kind of trying to own that moment. And I'm like, who is this person? Like, what is she? Yeah. Does she even know what she's talking about? How did you feel when you were there seeing that? Because that was a very serious. It might have been the only thing that Trump actually did during his presidency.
Yeah, that was one of the great things that he did do it. But I could tell you that, again, it's hard to tell you my mindset, because it's like,
you were still in the cult.
I was in the cult. It's like I tell, people that attack Pam, and you had Pam on your show, and she comes to me, and most of the attacks are things that she did in the past. And she comes to me and she says, Lev, did you know what I did here? And I said, Pam, I never looked, and I don't care, because I know it wasn't good. Because when you were in that cult, you couldn't have done good. It was all bad. Yeah. So I can't compare it to, I could only compare it to what you're going to do going forward. And same thing, so, it was when you're in that mindset, you're all in, you're proud, you're standing there in the front row, proud of what she's doing. You're proud of what, you're part of the family, you're part of the team. Especially I was so high in the inner circle. I mean, that I was one of them. So, I was, proud of it.
You also have forged a relationship with Ron DeSantis. And you got quite close to him. And,
well, he got quite close to me.
He got quite close to you, and yet recently denied really knowing you, claimed you were just a Republican donor, but you've got a whole bunch of text messages where you're like having a bromance with him.
Oh, I mean, the guy called me 12 o'clock at night, discussing me what we're going to do the next morning, who we're going to go speak to, and who we're going to raise money for, and coordinating with me how we're going to do a 1-2 punch that he's going to, help. You have to understand, Ron DeSantis approached me in June of 2018. Right before the elections in Florida. He was a congressman at the time. At the time, I was a supporter of Adam Putnam. Adam Putnam was running for Congress, and for the governor of Florida in the state of Florida. And we were at the hotel in Trump International after some event. He approached me and basically said, I'm Ron DeSantis, Congressman DeSantis, and I was told you're the guy that I need to see. And I looked at him like, he was a little off the wall, because I couldn't understand what he wanted. And then he started telling me that he wants to run for, that he's running for governor of Florida, and I live in Florida, and that he really would like for, since my relationship with Trump and Giuliani, if I could get Trump to support him, come out publicly supporting him. And I at first told him no, because I was, an Adam Putnam supporter, and I told him, that's not, I have a good relation with Adam, and, I'm not going to stab him in the back. Plus, I was a pro-cannabis guy, and DeSantis was anti-cannabis at the time. So I told him, I said, why would I support somebody that doesn't even agree with my beliefs for my state? And then he was persistent. He came every day, basically, after that day to the hotel, because that's where I was living at the time, and kept, in the evenings approaching me and talking to me and trying to convince me that he would, and one day he finally came and said, I thought about it, spoke to my people, and I think you're right. I should be pro-cannabis. If Trump would support me, I would definitely be pro-cannabis. And it was like a perfect storm because it's around the same time Trump gets some information about Adam Putnam, basically because Adam Putnam was a Jeb Bush guy, and when Trump was running in 2016, he came out and made some not nice remarks on him, and somebody told that to Trump, and Trump basically said, "Forget this guy. I'm never going to support him because he's very vindictive," and. And so the window was open. I realized that Putnam didn't have a chance at this time because Trump was going to step away from him. And DeSantis kind of grew on me, and he promised me that he would be very favorable towards cannabis. So, I told Rudy, and, Rudy went to Trump. And then the rest is history. You saw Trump come out of the...
So it's your fault, basically.
Yeah, it's all my fault.
Who is Ron DeSantis? I mean, I don't want to talk about him much because we don't have much time, but I cannot get my head around this guy. And the more video I see and the speeches that he makes and the kind of material that comes out of him, he really, it's his wife who's the powerhouse by the looks of it.
Well, his wife Casey, she's great. She's a good woman. I know Casey very well also. She definitely is the personality behind it because Ron has no personality.
She should be running, though, shouldn't she? She'd probably have more chance of winning.
She would definitely have more chance of winning instead of Ron. Even during the first gubernatorial race, she was, very helpful, standing by his side and doing the videos. And I think she was some sort of media personality prior to, back in the day.
News, I think.
Yeah. So, so she's definitely a lot more, presentable and has a better personality than Ron. Ron's problem is that, from what me being around him and knowing him, is he never had an agenda. His only agenda was getting to the White House. Like, he never had, I was pro-choice or anti, or pro, Second Amendment, or how you have certain congressmen or senators' values that, this is what I believe and this is what I'm going to run on. With Ron, it was, prior to every meeting, it was like he would flip-flop depending where the money was coming from. So it was like, and you could tell that from the beginning that, the one with the biggest check would basically dictate which way Ron would be heading.
Interesting. I mean, Trump's a bit like that as well, right? He only when he kind of got Mike Pence to join him because he needed that evangelical vote, he kind of then found his voice politically and ended up going so far to the right that he kind of re-established the rise of fascism and the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, and this horrific kind of where we're at now, basically, where women can't access abortion, and the country is heading in a direction that really no civilized country should have to deal with.
The difference between Trump and DeSantis in that standpoint is DeSantis will follow where the money is and then listen to the money, whereas Trump is a con artist. Well, he will play along with you, but then he will flip you, and eventually once he gets your money, he will do what he wants to do anyway, if you know what I mean. It's kind of,
Yeah. It's Trump's way or
the highway. Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about the moment finally where you realized that you'd been duped, that you were surrounded by criminals and manipulators, and that the cult was not something that you could remain with. Was this when you were arrested? Was this when you were serving your federal prison time? I mean, when did the change come where you felt that, that moment where you were like, aha?
It was a process. I mean, the aha moment was when I got, when I fired, when I was sitting in Alexandria, Virginia, when I got arrested, and I fired Trump's lawyers that he gave me, John Dowd and Kevin Downing. And I had no attorney at the time, not knowing what I'm even there for and how I'm ever going to get out, and, having no contact to the outside world, without a piece of paper or a pen, not allowed, just with a soap bar and a toothbrush in my cell. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, I got a postcard slipped under my door, addressed to me with no inmate number, nothing. Just basically, it was from the White House and Rudy Giuliani. And I'm not going to go into the message. You'll have to read the book and watch MeidasTouch Network. I'm going to be releasing that stuff on there. But that was when I came to a rude awakening that something's wrong. And I kind of started turning and reflecting and understanding that now I'm being used as a scapegoat, that I need to think quickly. Otherwise, I might never get out of here and my family might never see me again. And then it was a process. I mean, through, going to prison, going through, first of all, COVID, the trial, prison, a lot of time, several years passed that I was able to reflect, understand, and now being out of the cult, you're able to look at other news stations, your other opinions, you're able to reflect and understand and say, now how stupid must have I been? Because look, I didn't realize, I didn't see this was going on at the same time, this, because I only saw one way, no other way. And then really started, watching Trump lie on TV, knowing Giuliani lie on TV, one of the biggest moments came when, at the impeachment trial, when, Devin Nunes was sitting there as the, head House Judiciary Chair, and Eric Swalwell brought in something into evidence by saying, Lev Parnas said that, he interviewed on your behalf Victor Shokin or somebody, and he just lied to the American people and said, I don't know who Lev Parnas, he didn't even, he mispronounced my name. And then the next day, validation, when, because at first I was so upset. I was like, I can't believe, how is he going to get away with that? He's lying and blatantly. And Adam Schiff, I believe in God, and God works in mysterious ways. And the next day, Adam Schiff brought out the phone records, basically, showing that, well, wait a second, you were speaking to Lev Parnas for 10 minutes. And then the White House and then Rudy Giuliani, and you guys had this whole conversation on such and such a date. And then watching him weasel out of it by trying to say, because the phone number was registered to my wife, though it wasn't him, it was his wife calling me. I mean, crazy excuses and just deflection and deflection.
A lie on top of a lie.
Lie, deny, lie some more, deny some more. I mean, the Trump method. And I just kept watching all of that, and it just kept, reflecting and understanding. And it was, because it's not easy to get out of the cult in one day. It takes time. People don't understand, because you live so long in one type of area thinking, but, it takes you some time. So as bad as prison was and as bad as getting arrested, I think it was a blessing to me, because it saved my life and it saved my family's life, because, if I would have been deeper in, who knows where it could have ended or how it could have ended. So I thank God that, I was able to get out, and now I'm able to tell the truth and be on my journey to be able to help other people and help our country by, revealing, how corrupt Trump, Giuliani, and a lot of these guys are.
So if I was to go through some of the big headlines that you were kind of suckered in for, the idea that the election was stolen and that Trump should have won, because of course, he, to all intents and purposes, Trump thinks he is the president. A lot of his followers still refer to him as the president, and he wears the badge and has a mock-up of the Oval Office in Mar-a-Lago. He's basically pretending to be the president, which is what he did while he was the president, ironically. I mean, that now, how does it feel now, kind of where you're at now emotionally and mentally, to kind of see that big lie, as it's become known, being repeated?
Well, it's mixed emotion. I feel bad as an American citizen that we're going through this division, this craziness, and what he's done to our country, the embarrassment he's put on us and the whole world. Because, on one hand, you have to understand America was a country that fought for democracy. We would go to other countries and teach them how to voting rights, put an implication, because we had one of the things that made us great is no matter what side you were on, Republican or Democrat, once the elections were over, you had a transfer of power and it was on to the next one, and everybody kind of agreed, whereas Trump basically broke that. There is no more, he continues to spew, saying that the election was stolen, so we're a laughingstock, in a lot of all over the world. And then the other thing is, the idolization of a dictator like President Putin. I mean, since when does America idolize a dictator and not stand for democracy? I mean, to hear them stand up in Congress and and Trump and everybody talk about, the Ukraine.
All of them now. I mean, they're all into
that
him.
We should not give Ukraine money, which Russia is good. It's just mind-boggling. I mean, what's next? We're going to say that China is the leader of the world, and, we should, Taiwan, give them Taiwan also. I mean, it just doesn't make sense how this crazy flip transpired. I mean, in a way it does, because we've never seen, I think the last time we've seen this cult mentality to this degree was when Hitler was around, because you're not talking about a few thousand people. You got tens of millions of people that are so heavily, blinded by what's going on, that And the tentacles have reached now, and it's not just the regular public. You got people like in Congress and Senate and the DOJ and the State Department and the FBI, because the division is big, and you have in the Army, and our soldiers. So it's a very dangerous time. So, as an American citizen, it's difficult to watch. But
what about as a refugee? Because, this is something that, as a migrant myself, I think about a lot. You came to the US as a refugee, and then you're buddying up with people who are referring to immigrants and migrants and asylum seekers as vermin and as murderers and as rapists and as criminals, which is just offensive and completely untrue. Did any of that did you struggle with any of that?
I had certain days, even when I was deep in the cult, I had certain days that I struggled with certain things, like, when Trump would make fun of certain, there was one instance in particular when he made fun of a reporter that had, I think, cerebral palsy or something, like, he was up there, he made a comment, and Trump came out and, made fun of him. That really, hit me hard, because watching everybody laugh at that, sitting in the hotel and watching on TV how everybody's laughing at that, it was kind of sick, but it's difficult to say anything, because then they would look at you right away like, what's wrong with you? Like, maybe there's no trust. So, and, having conversations at home where my wife would constantly tell me, that's not you, Lev. Like, how can you be around like these people? You grew up in a different world, you used to stand up against bullies, and now, you're around all these bullies and all this stuff. And, I would shut her up, and basically, you say, you don't understand. This is the president of the United States. Are you kidding me? Do you understand what's going on? Do you understand where I'm at and what's happening? This is something that, and I would push the envelope, in which I almost lost my family because of my actions and being in the cult. And so it was difficult with lots of moments, especially when he would talk about immigrants, because a lot of, people in doing that, talking about, had a relationship with certain immigrants. Either they had wives that families were immigrants, like, Trump's
most Americans.
Like Melania was an immigrant, what I'm saying to you. Let's not go that far. I mean, most America's made up of immigrants. So for them to sit there and spew it, it was difficult. But, when you're in the cult, and when it's like being on drugs, I tell people, you're not really, if you take too much drugs, no matter how much you think you're in control of your faculties, you're not. That's why people do such outrageous things. That's why people jump off buildings, think they could fly. That's not because it's because the mind gets taken away. And being in a cult, it's sometimes even more powerful than a drug, because of the environment you're in, and you're surrounded. Like, at least when you're on drugs, there you can have support from different people that could help you try to get out of it. But when you're in a cult, everybody around you is part of the cult. You're not allowed to be around people that your friends, your family. That's why if you take a look at the division that's transpired, even inside families, we have families in America that don't sit at the same table because of, they don't agree with, either you're for Trump or you're for, the right of, so.
And the sad part of that is that it's completely meaningless, like Trump is meaningless. Like, the idea that the president as an individual should define you, it's pure cult mentality. And all the people that would take a bullet for this guy, their lives were not better during those 4 years.
That's the crazy part. Absolutely. They don't understand. And it wasn't that he made it better, because what a lot of them don't understand, that there's a time gap that goes on, So what we're feeling now is probably what Trump did, and what we felt was from more what Obama did, and then then later on we're going to feel what Biden did. You don't feel right away what the different changes the person puts in and stuff like that, the president puts in. But I would never, I think calling him the president or even ex-president it's a disservice to our country, because he's a dictator, and he only cares about himself, the things that he spews, the rallies, the hatred, the division, the anger that, the United States president is a president that usually talks about love, not hate, talks about unity, not division. He's supposed to be the president for all the people. Doesn't matter if you like him or you don't like him. His job is to be able to, because the country is, his job is to take care of everybody. And
he didn't even try that, And that the crazy thing, Lev, is that COVID could have been the thing that brought everyone together. COVID could have been that thing that bound us all, because it didn't pick out Republicans or Democrats or straight or gay or black or white.
Yeah.
It chose everybody, and he rejected COVID as a way to unify the country, and subsequently and consequently the loss of hundreds of thousands more lives than were necessary if he had taken it seriously.
Oh, absolutely. But, because he understands, he's not stupid. He understands that if he unites the country, that he'll never win. He'll never be in the seat, because a lot of people, his gig is up. The only way he could continue his power reign is by the division and building onto his cult and building his numbers to be bigger than the others, and to be able to contain it with power. Because it's not about winning with policies right now, because when he goes on his rants, he doesn't talk about policies. He's not out there, he's talking about revenge and anger and how he's retribution, getting rid of the Constitution. I mean, crazy stuff. So
that is the plan, isn't it? I mean, if he was to win again, he wants to dismantle the federal government.
Oh, absolutely.
He wants to dismantle the FBI and the Justice Department. He is going to go full dictator, full autocracy, full fascist.
Because he wants to stay in power. He doesn't want to leave. He doesn't want you to be able to vote him out.
Which is what Putin has done in Russia.
100%. 100%, Anthony. That's exactly his idol, Putin. He looks up. He has a bromance with Kim Jong-un. Just think about they're writing love letters. I mean,
so weird.
It's like you can't.
So weird.
If somebody told you, you would never believe it if you didn't see it with your own eyes.
Yeah, I feel sorry for Elton John being given that CD of Rocket Man. I was just like, don't bring Elton John into this. He's done nothing wrong. My final question to you is, you're out now. You're still serving your time. You're under house arrest, I understand, which can't be easy in itself. But what would you say to other people who hopefully are not going to get arrested and have to, do prison time, but actually needs that little nudge to be able to recognize that what they've been listening to is untrue, that the media is, there's an ecosystem of far-right propaganda that they've been caught up in? What would you say to people who maybe have thought about the fact that maybe they're, on the wrong team?
I mean, it's difficult to say, because you have, the way I look at it is, you have three kind of people right there. You have your cultists that no matter what I say is not going to change their mind, because until they hit a dead end wall, until they hit a rock themselves and come to a reckoning, you're not going to get them out of the cult, because once you're in, it's like you're in, and you're in for good. Then you have the people that are basically know that he's a fake, know he's no good, don't like him, don't want him, but for their own personal financial purposes or greed, that they're pushing, not looking at what the future is like as far as what the whole country or will be for their kids or grandkids, but are looking what their pockets are right now, and think that certain policies that he's going to promote or do is going to help them in their business or help them personally. And those people, have greed that are in their eyes, and they're not stupid. They know exactly what. So there's nothing I could really say to them, because they know the truth. They just they're
grifting.
They're grifting, exactly. They're willing to play the game. But then the third group is where I think it could be helped, and that's the people that don't have enough knowledge of what's going on. That's the majority, of people that work hard every day and get glimpses on television and believe that what they're seeing is true and is driving their beliefs on who to vote for and what to do. And for them, I would say that we live in a time of technology right now, and the best thing you could do is do a little, sit down and do a little research, go on the different sites, go on the left and right, and see the difference and find the middle and realize the truth and what's going on, because I think every vote is important. And I think that it's important to know what's going on in our country right now to be able to make the right decision, because who we vote into president in 2024 is, they say every election is important. This is the one. This is really the one, because if God forbid he gets into office, first of all, I don't know if we'll ever be able to get him out. Second of all, the damage that he could cause will be, could happen for the next 10, 20, 30 years to come. So it's very important. I think information is key. Knowledge of the information is key, because I think what they pry on is you not getting the information. And by you getting just tidbits and pieces of things that they tell you and then you run with it, look at it, try to find it. With the information sources we have out there today, I mean, you could spend 10 minutes a day and you could see that, a lot of the stuff they're talking about is propaganda nonsense, and it will help you understand what you're dealing with.
Yeah. Well, that's what we try to do here on MeidasTouch and on 5 Minute News. And I feel like, people are turning to independent journalism more and more because, the legacy networks, people are just not sure who to believe. And so, find someone you trust and listen to them.
Absolutely. People like you, Anthony, do a great job. Independent networks are, I think, what the future is about, because the right and the left is too jaded. They press their own agenda, but people need to know the truth, exactly what's going on, to be able to make the right choice.
Okay. Lev Parnas, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you for having me.
I'm Anthony Davis. Subscribe to my new show, MAGA Uncovered, with Ron Filipkowski. That's Wednesdays here on the Meidas Media Network. And support me and independent journalism at patreon.com/5Minute News. Join me next week with a brand new special guest and more factual news stories to discuss on the 5 Minute News Weekend Show with MeidasTouch.